Tonight, grief and anger. The bodies of 6 hostages held by Hamas have been recovered. Among the dead, American Hirsch Goldberg Poland. The IDF says he and the other hostages killed just hours before the gruesome discovery.
I'm Imtiaz Taib in Jerusalem, where thousands of Israelis have gathered to demand a ceasefire and hostage release deal following the killings of 6 hostages.
Well, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows to settle accounts with Hamas. Also tonight, on strike. At least 10,000 hotel workers across the country walk off the job right in the middle of the busy Labor Day weekend. Plus, your holiday travel forecast, what you need to know before you head to the beach or head home. The push to vaccinate as the school year gets underway will show you how the U.S. is working to end mistrust and get more kids protected against disease.
We've been making sure we can break down barriers so that kids and families can get vaccinated.
And later, triumph over tragedy. An American swimmer shares her journey to the Paris Paralympic Games, giving us all a lesson in navigating life's challenges.
I'm one of many of para-athletes who refuse to give up.
This is the CBS Weekend News from New York with Jerika Duncan.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us this Sunday. We begin with outrage and mourning after Israeli forces recovered the bodies of 6 hostages held by Hamas. Among them is Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Poland. His family said his funeral will take place on Monday afternoon in Jerusalem. President Joe Biden released a statement saying he was, quote, devastated and outraged by the news. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken has met virtually with the families. CBS's Imtiaz Taib begins our coverage tonight from East Jerusalem. Imtiaz, good evening to you.
Good evening. Well, tens of thousands of Israelis have taken to the streets in grief and fury tonight following the announcement 6 hostages, including an American, had been killed in Gaza, and to demand a ceasefire deal with Hamas, which would see the remaining captives freed.
The 6 have been identified as Ori Danino, Alex Lobanov, Almog Sarusi, Carmel Gat, Eden Yerushalmi, and Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Poland. Within hours of Eden Yerushalmi's body being returned to her family, they gathered to say their anguished final goodbyes. Almog Sarusi's loved ones were also overcome with grief at his burial. His mother Nira saying, "We love you and you will stay in our hearts." Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Poland's parents, whose campaign to bring attention to the plight of the hostages took them around the world, including addressing last month's Democratic Party convention.
Hirsch, stay strong, survive.
Issued a statement saying, with broken hearts, the Goldberg Poland family is devastated to announce the death of their beloved son and brother, Hirsch. According to Israel's Ministry of Health, preliminary autopsy reports have found all 6 were shot in the head between 48 and 72 hours ago, with the Israeli military saying Hamas was responsible. The news of the killings triggered spontaneous mass demonstrations across Israel, including outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office in Jerusalem.
Well, the announcement of the 6 hostages' death has really triggered this wave of national grief, but also a deep, deep sense of anger.
Many blame Netanyahu for, in their words, sabotaging a ceasefire deal with Hamas that's been under negotiations for months. Lee Siegel is the brother of Keith Siegel, an Israeli-American still being held in Gaza.
My message to Prime Minister Netanyahu is that my brother Keith and all the remaining hostages need to be home immediately.
In a taped address, Netanyahu said he was committed to reaching a deal that will, quote, return all of our hostages.
And tonight, President Biden called the Goldberg Polands to express his condolences and said Hamas would, quote, pay for its crimes, while the ceasefire and hostage release talks between Israel and Hamas remain stubbornly stuck, Jerika, despite the majority of Israelis continuing to demand a deal.
Imtiaz Taib for us in East Jerusalem, thank you. To the war in Ukraine, where more than 40 people were injured, including 5 children, when a Russian launched a barrage of missile strikes on the city of Kharkiv. The mayor says the 10 missiles struck various locations, including a shopping center. Meanwhile, Russia's defense ministry said its air defenses intercepted and destroyed more than 150 Ukrainian drones fired overnight in one of the biggest attacks of the war. Back here at home, tomorrow, Labor Day is expected to be a very busy travel day for millions of people, whether on the roads or at airports. For the forecast, let's bring in CBS meteorologist Andrew Kozak with the outlook on what's ahead. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening, Jerika. If you're going to be traveling on Monday, we have some hot but dry conditions out in the desert Southwest, connecting through areas like L.A. and Phoenix. Not looking too bad. Texas, you'll notice this green down here. We're going to be talking about some massive flooding, and that could affect your travel for areas like Houston and Dallas. More on that in just a second. Southeast looking good. We have a couple of storms to talk about, but then from the mid-Atlantic to the Northeast, things are looking great for those New York City airports. Looking awesome. Now, as we head into Texas, this is where we have a front that will move through for Labor Day and kind of stall out for Tuesday into Wednesday. This is going to cause some flooding issues. All eyes on Texas this week. On the flip side, we have some fire danger and very dry conditions in the West and the Rockies. This is going to be an issue for us with dry conditions, thunderstorms that can spark some fires, and winds over 45 miles per hour. In the meantime, if you're wondering what's happening in the tropics, the Gulf has a very small chance of this cluster of storms developing into anything, but we are watching a system southeast of the Lesser Antilles. This may develop into a tropical depression in the next several days. Jerika?
All right, Andrew Kozak, thank you so much. Some Labor Day plans could face disruptions due to a major hotel strike spreading across the country. CBS's Chanel Call has been following all of that and joins us with the very latest. Good evening, Chanel.
Good evening, Jerika. Before many of us even woke up this morning, hospitality workers from California to Connecticut went on strike, threatening to bring operations to a grinding halt on one of the busiest travel weekends of the year. Outside the Waikiki Beach Marriott in Honolulu, 200 hotel staff are demanding a pay increase, including Native Hawaiian Brianna Canincia.
I won't have to work 2 jobs. I won't have to get 3 hours of sleep. So that's how important it is.
Similar scenes are playing out in 24 hotels across 8 major cities, from Boston to San Jose and Seattle. The strike follows months of failed negotiations with major chains like Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt.
These are housekeepers who, clean rooms every day.
Gwen Mills is the president of Unite Here, the union which represents roughly 300,000 hospitality workers.
So what are the sticking points right now?
The wage proposals are designed for workers to be able to afford to live in the places where they welcome people to.
In a statement to CBS News, representatives from Hyatt and Hilton said they look forward to continuing negotiations with union workers. Marriott did not respond to a request for comment.
Hawaiians and local people who are expected to share our aloha with all of these guests, to share our culture, but we also want our share of the profit as well.
And with more contracts set to expire this year, we could see tens of thousands more union hospitality workers go on strike in the coming months. Some of the impacted hotels say they plan to stay open, but services could be modified or limited. Jerika?
Yeah, those workers, very important. Chanel Call, thank you. It was a working weekend on the campaign trail for Vice President Kamala Harris and running mate Tim Walz. And tonight, there's new polling on the presidential race as we inch closer to Election Day. CBS's Skylar Henry joins us from the White House with more on that. Skylar, good evening.
Hey, Jerika, good evening to you. It is a battleground blitz in this tight race as both campaigns focus on key topics, including the economy, reproductive rights, and foreign policy. Democratic vice presidential nominee Governor Tim Walz was back in Minnesota Sunday for the state fair ahead of another busy week on the campaign trail.
I think people are seeing that we're getting to talk about Minnesota across the country, talk about the economy here.
Recent polls show more Americans have a favorable view of Walz than Republican vice presidential nominee J.D. Vance.
I think he's a great gentleman and a good leader. He really engages in every community.
Several top issues remain remain on the minds of voters, including foreign policy, reproductive rights, and the economy. The Harris-Walz campaign released a memo Sunday as it looks to expand voter support through its ground game, opening more than 300 offices and bringing on 2,000 staffers in the 7 battleground states. The Trump-Vance campaign says its battleground operation is rolling as the former president looks to lay out his vision for Americans over the next 9 weeks.
We feel very good about what our message is, which is economic freedom and economic opportunity for everybody.
Though one of the nation's largest labor unions has yet to endorse either ticket.
Half of our members are Republicans, half of our members are Democrats, so we have to serve all of our membership equally. We want the opportunity to sit down with Vice President Harris.
Now, President Biden will join Harris for a Labor Day event on the Trail in Pennsylvania tomorrow. It's another battleground state. It'll be their first joint campaign event since the vice president became the Democratic nominee. Former President Trump heads back to Pennsylvania later this week. Jerika.
Skylar Henry at the White House, thank you. Straight ahead on the CBS Weekend News, the CDC's push to stop the spread of preventable diseases in children. Plus, a high school teen meets their Hollywood hero in Colorado. And later, a Paralympic swimmer makes a triumphant return to the water after a near-deadly encounter with a shark. As children return to school, there is growing concern over the lack of vaccinations being used against preventable diseases. In some cases, access is the problem. However, misinformation and mistrust are also stopping some parents from getting their children shots. Now the CDC is stepping in with a plan to boost the numbers. Here's CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder.
No tears from Fort Worth, Texas kindergartner Emerly Soria getting her required vaccines with her dad and little brother.
She was behind on her vaccination schedule by 1 year, so we had to get all of them taken care of.
They were able to catch up on their vaccines because the Tarrant County Health Department brought this free clinic to a high school gym in their neighborhood.
It was a lot cheaper than going into a doctor's office and getting it done that way.
Health workers here gave out more than 2,600 doses to nearly 1,000 people.
The reason it's working so well is because they feel comfortable coming here. It's a school that they know, and it's a place that is familiar to them.
But as children head back to school, parents filing for vaccine exemptions have gone up to about 3% since the pandemic. That makes communities more susceptible to diseases like measles, one of the most contagious viruses.
We see pockets in communities where that vaccination level is lower. So we want to really think about the unique barriers that might be present in those communities.
We've seen a rise in measles as well as now pertussis or whooping cough cases. What is the CDC doing about that?
We have a Vaccines for Children's program here in the country that covers the cost of vaccines for folks who are either on Medicaid or lower income. We've been making sure we can break down barriers so that kids and families can get vaccinated.
Director Cohen says children got behind on vaccinations because of the pandemic and mistrust.
We had a lot of distrust of healthcare, a lot of distrust of vaccines in particular come out of the COVID pandemic. And that's been more isolated to the COVID vaccine. People still trust the vaccines they got when they were kids.
Meeting families like the Sorias in their community will help children like Emerly get ready for school with lollipops, Band-Aids, and protection from preventable diseases. Dr. Celine Gounder, CBS News, Atlanta.
Gotta love those lollipops. Well, still ahead on the CBS Weekend News, singer and actress Selena Gomez goes back to school to surprise a group of fans in Colorado. A high school girls volleyball team in Colorado got a little star power on their side this weekend. That is pop star and actress Selena Gomez showing up at their game. Gomez was in town for the Telluride Film Festival. The team left her a bright orange poster you see there on a bulletin board in town asking for her to sing the national anthem. Gomez didn't belt out any songs, but she did take photos and signed autographs telling the excited kids, quote, "I saw the sign, so I had to come." And it was flower power on full display today in the Netherlands. Locals and tourists lined the streets in the Dutch town of Zundert for the largest flower parade in the world. They were treated to a stunning display of colorful floats decorated only with dahlias. 20 teams of volunteers compete for the prize. The parade is an annual event that began in 1936 in honor of then Queen Wilhelmina. Next on the CBS Weekend News, an American Paralympic swimmer whose unexpected path led her to Paris. At this year's Paralympic Games, look out for 24-year-old Allie Truitt. She's one of 33 swimmers representing Team USA and calls her ability to compete a miracle.
Ready, go.
Back in the water is where Allie Truitt belongs. As a little girl, she swam for fun. By age 12, she was swimming to be the best, says her coach, Jamie Barone.
One more, 31-1. Allie's the type of athlete that does anything that's asked of her without asking questions.
In high school, she broke records. By college, she was a top swimmer at Yale. And her specialty, swimming long distances fast, would be her saving grace.
This has been definitely a roller coaster of a journey, and you know, I'm just over a year out, and there are definitely still good days and bad days.
You see, last year, Allie almost lost her life. Just 2 days after graduation, a shark attacked her while in the waters of Turks and Caicos Islands. She was with her old teammate, Sophie Pilkington, who had just graduated from medical school.
Sophie was in the water with me during the attack, and she was my captain of the swim team my freshman year. After the shark attack and bit my foot and part of my leg off, we swam ourselves back to safety to the boat, roughly 75 yards in the ocean. And immediately upon getting on the boat, Sophie tied a tourniquet on my leg to stop the bleeding.
On Allie's 23rd birthday, doctors amputated her leg.
I was feeling really fearful of the water. Hearing the sound of water at that point would trigger flashbacks to the attack.
But fear's grip held no power.
You have the shark attack, and then you get back in the water in a matter of...
I got back in 6 weeks after for the
6
first
weeks.
time. And I was at my first competition 3.5 months after the attack.
3.5 months later, you're competing.
Yes.
Okay. Last month, we joined her at practice in Connecticut.
Like stroke your arms on your back. One at a time.
She works out 6 days a week,
4,
using a prosthetic leg in the gym. In competition where it's not allowed, she's learned to swim without it.
In lane 4, Allie Truitt, her first Paralympic trials.
At the U.S. Paralympic trials, she placed first in the 100-meter backstroke,
Allie Truitt,
setting the American record.
I'm one of many of para-athletes who are absolutely incredible and just refuse to give up.
Do you see yourself as past the point of asking, why me?
I think, you know, there will always be a piece of me that wonders that. A friend gave me a book early on in my recovery called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And the message in the book is we can't control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond and how we make meaning of it.
An outlook that proves Allie Truitt is already winning.
Truly a remarkable athlete. Allie, who is the oldest of 4, says her family has played a key role in her recovery. Expect to see her this week competing Thursday and Friday. Well, that's the CBS Weekend News for this Sunday. I'm Jerika Duncan in New York. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.